Big challenge for any government, and this government probably, as we're on the runway to the next general election. Let's talk about something else that affects every one of us in a different way, the conflict in Ukraine, which is going on. Now, Stephen, you've just been to Ukraine. You met the Zelenskys, I think, while you were there. Tell us a bit about what you were doing.
I was invited by the President's office, in fact by the First Lady's office, Alina Zelenska, the wife of the President, to host a summit on mental health there. I was so impressed that a country at war would host a summit on mental health, that it isn't just presenting an image of resilience, it's also presenting an image of fragility, which I thought was honest and remarkable. And it's clear that traumatic mental health issues strike the nation very hard, not just soldiers who have suffered. I think thousands have lost limbs already, thousands and thousands, and that carries huge mental burden and strain. But children every day being taken down to air raid shelters, every day having to worry about what's happening to their father or their mother who are at the front. So I thought this is obviously something I couldn't turn down, plus curiosity. I've never been in a war zone, hadn't ever been to Ukraine.
And what actually happened when you were there?
Well, there was an air raid the night before the summit, actually. A great screeching woke me from my slumbers at about 4:30 in the morning, and I was told to go down to the basement. We knew where that was. There were signs saying shelter as soon as we went to the hotel, so we were aware. And down I went. There were a few people there. The staff were there. There was water and a coffee machine. They were quite smart. They knew that the early warning was such that there'd be, if there were a serious threat to Kyiv itself, there'd be a later warning. And indeed that happened. An explosion was apparently heard, and others then came down, and the bomb shelter was full. It was alarming in every sense of the word. It was no threat to me. That it was apparently some drones that were downed by their defence, so there wasn't even a building hit. But it was a reminder, and this happens 4, 5, 6 times a week.
And what was the thing that most struck you about all of the people you met? I know you met some bereaved families.
Well, their commitment to the war was really interesting. I mean, of course, they hate that it's happening. I spoke to a woman who had lost her husband only 2 weeks earlier, and her husband was an artist, a musician, and she was an artist too. And they said that a lot of their friends who were of the more militaristic caste, if you like, hadn't volunteered early on, but a lot of artists had. And if you know anything about the history of Ukraine, in the 1930s, they had what they called the executed Renaissance, a flowering of artists and thinkers and poets and painters who were all gulagged or shot by Stalin's Soviets. And this happened again in the 60s. Tyrants do that. Putin does it. The intellectuals, the intelligentsia, whom we mock at home because we have the freedom to do so, they're the first target. And so they were the first to volunteer. It was very revealing. And my goodness, they hate the Russians. They want this war to carry on until they know they have won.
One of the interesting things about it, Salma, is not just the determination, which took many other countries by surprise, the determination of Ukraine to fight, but also in this country at least, the political consensus for supporting Ukraine is rock solid. That seems to be fracturing a bit on the other side of the Atlantic, but here at least it's rock solid. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's a part of me that wants to say that it's the idea of British exceptionalism and, you know, invoking Churchill in the Second World War, Germany in particular. Now, I know people will talk about, you know, lots of wealthy Russians coming here, but it's not the same thing as sort of our geopolitical positioning. And I think that has always been something that we have been concerned about. Our worry about Russia as a threat on our doorstep has always been a little bit more acute than the American fear around China, or indeed the Europeans having to work with Russia much more closely.
Very interesting indeed. Now, we were talking a few minutes ago about that extraordinary story about allegedly a parliamentary staffer being arrested for spying for China. A few minutes ago, the Prime Minister was asked about this. Hello, and with us on a busy weekend for the news. Just back from his own visit to Ukraine, a national treasure, I think, Stephen Fry. Salma Shah, Conservative former advisor, who's seen plenty of government crises, and with impeccable timing, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, is with us this week. let's take a look at what is making the news. And no surprise, a lot of the front pages go on the extraordinary story of the escape and capture of Daniel Khalife. What will be going on in government right now? Now we know this.
Well, the particulars of the story are about this parliamentary researcher having influence or relationships with ministers with classified information. So if they haven't already been part of the investigation that led to his arrest, then certainly they'll be looking through to understand what contact this person had, whether there's been any breach of that classified information, and certainly what other relationships they may have been involved with this researcher.
And the Chinese government at the G20 summit this morning. Let's talk then about the biggest story of the week, Daniel Khalife's escape from Wandsworth Prison. Now, Stephen, not many people might know, but you actually went to jail as a teenager.
Yeah, I did.
But as an adult, you spent some time volunteering at Wandsworth Prison. So for people who've never been inside a jail or certainly never been there, what's it like?
It's a pretty squalid place. It's crowded. It's not very happy. I've gone in to help with their radio station. They have an inmate-run radio station, which is very well done. And there are other things that come in from the outside, theatre productions and so on. They're all, I mean, charming efforts to raise the happiness levels of some very unhappy people. But it's crowded. All the London prisons are very crowded. Pentonville, I think, was built for 500 and has 1,200 or something. Charles will know better than me, of course. But it's a pretty grim situation. There's a lot of overspill, and a lot of them are waiting to go, to be sorted out into ABC and so on. And
going after their trials.
Yeah.
I mean, Charlie, just briefly, because we're about to hear from the Justice Secretary, what wider problems has describing my life? Salma, you were in government for a lot of that period. We're looking at 2016, from the morning after the referendum until the departure of Liz Truss. Why do you think things went so mad or were so sort of traumatic?
There are a number of reasons. I'm going to watch this programme and be slightly triggered by it. I think that there is a bit of a fundamental failure in terms of the types of people we are recruiting and have in politics. I think there needs to be a big change in mindset.
Follow the same rules in a very fast-changing world. I mean, Stephen, it has been an extraordinary period. COVID, Brexit, all of those things.
Brexit, we must mention Brexit. The Labour Party is afraid to mention it. It was a catastrophe and everybody knows it deep in their bones.
Well,
and
not everybody would agree with you.
They know it, of course they do. And certainly the rest of the world does. But aside from that, yes, it's funny because it's a clown car crash and you can't help being amused by it. But unfortunately, during that time, so much was taken out of what should be the run of politics. Extraordinary that you can have a conversation with an economics minister in Labour who didn't even mention the climate catastrophe coming, that there's a tsunami coming towards us, which is partly the technology and AI and what's going to happen to work for everybody in this country, almost everybody, and there is the climate crisis. And yet everyone's talking about sort of just doing the same thing, only better. It's catastrophic.
Well, that's similar to what Salma said about the same kind of people coming in and trying to do these things in the same way. But Charlie, from a sort of practical point of view, you're close to public service running. We've seen a huge churn from all these ministers as successive administrations fell over.
I was trying to count the Justice Secretaries since 2010. And
I mean, that was Rishi Sunak's big promise, really, to the country, is I will end the chaos and we'll just move on and things will be okay.
Well, MPs are resigning and saying they're not going to stand at the next election. I think we should stop using the word honourable of MPs until they've earned it. So it wouldn't be an automatic honorarium, as it were, to be called the honourable. Because honour, it may be an old-fashioned word, but it should have some meaning amongst politicians.
Who would decide, Stephen, who got the...
You would have a vote every 3 months from the public as to whether or not this politician
can you lose it as well,
had been honourable.
Yeah. Can you become dishonourable then?
Definitely.
Nobody would get it.
Nobody at all, Salma.
No,
First damning
not at
from
all.
a former advisor.
There you are.
Goodness me. Well, my very honourable trio at the table this morning, thank you so much for being with us and giving us all of those really interesting insights. Thank you, of course, for your company as always. You can watch the first of that series, State of Chaos, on BBC Two. Not be blamed for wondering what will have gone wrong by the time he hits the tarmac. You can catch anything you missed today on iPlayer. I'm heading soon to the newscast studio in a few minutes for our next edition of our weekend podcast. Try that out on BBC Sounds if you fancy, and I will look forward, of course, to seeing you back here, same time, same place, next week. Goodbye for now.
Top of the hunt for crumbling concrete in public buildings, with ministers' noises off.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing?
Stress for schools and easy picking for the office.